All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free 800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV, and our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. Exonation, my guest this hour is someone who is known to everyone who enjoys or has watched any TV show, well, not the majority of TV shows, I should say, when it comes to the paranormal. My guest is Loyd Auerbach. He's the director of the Office of Paranormal Investigations. He is president of the Forever Family Foundation, an organization supporting research on life after death, and the work of spirit mediums in grieving process. In late 2010, he was appointed to the faculty of Atlantic University, where he's teaching an existing online parapsychology course. In 2013, he began teaching online courses through the Rhine Research Center's education arm. He is author and co-author of 9 books so far. He's been doing this for 35 years. And it's our great pleasure to bring to the X Zone again our good friend Loyd Auerbach. And Loyd, welcome back to the X Zone. Long time no talk.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. It's good to be back.
Loyd, I've been doing this show for 22 years now. You've been doing paranormal research for 35 years. Have you seen any advancements or any new discoveries that can prove to the skeptics once and for all that ghosts are real?
We're not going to be able to prove well, let's just step for a second. Most of the people who call themselves skeptics are actually not skeptics.
Right.
They are disbelievers or deniers. So there's really no way to convince them. They're going to have to be convinced when they die, I think. For the rest of the world, we're talking about the existence of ghosts. We have lots of evidence, but proof is a very, very difficult thing in science in general. And while we may be able to sway people's opinions that the evidence is good, there are still, even within parapsychology, alternative explanations for even seeing a ghost and communicating with that ghost that rely more on other psychic information sources of the living. So it's not, I don't see it happening in terms of proving it to people, except from a personal perspective of accepting the evidence.
Now, have you ever seen a ghost?
I've felt, I've smelled, and I've heard, but in terms of human ghosts, I have not seen a ghost. A couple of animals, pets, but deceased pets, but no. We put a lot of emphasis on seeing, but the fact is that people do have different kinds of experiences with apparitions. They don't have to be visual.
So when it comes to looking for a ghost or trying to see proof of their existence, are we using the wrong sense?
Well, our normal senses are really not involved at all. It's kind of one of my colleagues, Ed May, who's actually the first author on the new book we have coming out next week, ESP Wars, is developing a new model of ESP based kind of on synesthesia, which is a phenomenon that happens to people when your senses and perceptions get crossed. So it would be people who hear colors and smell music. So it goes in your normal sensory structures, the information, but it gets translated into a different sense. And ESP is kind of like that. We have a consciousness-based ability to pick up information, whether it is from the environment or from other people or from perhaps the dead, from ghosts, from spirits. And that information gets translated in a way like synesthesia into a visual signal or an auditory signal or a combination of those kinds of things.
Parapsychology 10, 15 years ago was considered a pseudoscience. Is the academic taking parapsychology more seriously these days?
Well, it depends on who you ask, of course. Thanks to the rise of the skeptics with a capital S, the deniers, the groups like what used to be called PsyCop, now CSI, and a real turn in American academia to ridicule people who express an interest, even just an interest in the subject. Privately, you can talk to many people, some of whom are Nobel Prize winners and people who are really high-placed scientists and academics. They might talk about their experiences. They might, talk about their interests, but they can't express that publicly in any way, shape, or form because they might lose their jobs. They might have a problem internally with their departments. It's, there's this giggle factor that's a real problem here in the United States. It's even a problem in England. Brian Josephson, who is a physicist, Nobel Prize-winning physicist, was uninvited to a conference.
Lloyd, I hate to do this, but I have to take a 2-minute break. Please stand by.
Sure.
This is the X Zone. We'll be back. Welcome back, everyone. Loyd Auerbach is our special guest this hour. www.mindreader.com and www.hauntedbychocolate.com. We were talking about the acceptance of parapsychology by academia, and I had to cut you off, and I apologize. So if you could continue, it would be appreciated.
Sure. I was just mentioning that Brian Josephson, who is a Nobel Prize-winning physicist who has had a long-standing interest in parapsychology and consciousness studies, was uninvited to a major physics conference, I believe in the UK, because of his interest, and was expressly stated that it was because of his interest in the subject. And thankfully, he was reinvited because many of the attendees, the other physicists, were appalled by that kind of academic prejudice that was offered. And that's what we face. We face a huge amount of academic prejudice about even considering this. It's just really sad that, scientists can't even say that they're interested in looking at the evidence, and they demand from us, and they state this, extraordinary evidence, but then when we try to present them the evidence, they don't want to look at it because they say that it couldn't possibly be real.
Why? Why can't it be real? Who says what is real and who says what's not real?
Well, this has been a problem in science and development of science since the beginning. People have a paradigm, they have a set idea of what the way the world, physical reality works, and scientists, as much as they talk about being open-minded, are closed-minded in certain areas, including within their own fields to certain ideas. And we've had again and again examples of both. It's not just religion that's been opposed to new ideas. It's also been science that's been the problem sometimes.
But is it fair to say that if science is wrong, they could be missing out on so many wonderful things that they're just keeping the rest of the world within the box because they're afraid to look outside of it?
I think it's a fair statement. I look at this with a sense of wonder. I really think that we're talking about what the limits of the human being are. And what parapsychology and consciousness studies in general look at are experiences that science doesn't even want to touch. It's not that, they may, if science put its energy towards looking at these experiences, maybe they would find that there's some psychological or other explanation. But we're the only ones doing it, and that's a really sad thing. Millions of people have these experiences, and that says something about our human condition. And it's not scientific to ignore the experiences or just to write them off because you think they're mass hallucination or some crazy idea.
So how do you explain to people who have had these experiences, and to these people, these experiences are very real? Right. They don't care what science says. They don't care what the church says. They don't care what anybody says because they have lived the experience. Then you walk in, and how do you deal with them knowing that they think that everyone doesn't believe them, and yet here you are.
Yeah, I think that that is something I deal with, and when people find out who I am and what what my background is, and then I'm serious, but also very, very normal. I'm not, a highly overly academic person in terms of communication skills, and I'm also not a whack job because let's face it, in every field there are those people. So when people see I have a very common sense approach, and there's a lot of history in parapsychology that I can speak to and people's experiences, they tell me their stories, and we try to give them an idea of what these things could have been in their experience, and somewhat how to integrate them into their lives. Because I think that's a key factor there too, is that this is nothing here is paranormal. There's nothing on the side of normal in terms of the number of experiences or that they're outside of human experience. They're all part of human experience. They're only paranormal in the sense that we don't have a full explanation for how they're working.
That's it?
Paranormal is a label.
Yeah.
Supernatural will be a label. Extraordinary is a label. If you go by the numbers, the number of people who actually have these experiences, they're not that unusual. What do you consider an extraordinary experience? If 25% of the population claims to have seen a ghost in their life, is that an extraordinary experience? If it's that many people,
not really.
If it's 0.5%, maybe that's a little bit more extraordinary. But we're talking about, especially with certain ESP experiences, it's even a significant higher number. And the problem is that sheer numbers doesn't necessarily make something what we think it is, but without studying it, without the resources to truly study those experiences and the circumstances around them, we're kind of just really plodding along very slowly.
Now, Loyd, you've been involved in television coverage of the paranormal since the early 1980s. How has that coverage changed over the years?
Well, it's kind of changed in the same way that most television coverage has changed, including TV news. There's more of a focus on kind of the sensational headline. It's what we see in social media, too. The story is less important than the shock factor and getting the interest. So it's really even more today than it had been in the past about ratings and grabbing people's attention. And unfortunately, that means that information goes by the wayside. In any show you watch today, and that's whether it's a cooking show or a paranormal reality show, there is that point where they kind of tell you what you just saw, and then you come back from commercial, and they're telling you what you just saw again, and then what's coming up. Yeah. And that's about a third of the show. So how much information in an hour show when they're already down to 42 minutes, and they're cutting it down by another 15? It's a half-hour show at the most, and there's not a lot of information presented. One of the things I have seen significantly different than the early days is that most of these paranormal reality shows do not care for a moment what scientists, researchers in the field of parapsychology have to say about this phenomena. And in fact, the entire paranormal community, which has grown up around ghost hunters and ghost adventures and these other shows, seems to disdain parapsychology, and in fact talks about the paranormal field as if it's a field of study without even recognizing that parapsychology has been around for over 100 years.
It makes me laugh to listen to some of these people who call themselves paranormal researchers or parapsychologists who have no idea what the true words mean. For example, they've taken no courses. They've read a lot on the internet, so that gives them credibility. And go ahead.
I was going to say some of them actually take potshots at those of us who teach courses, saying, "How can you teach any of this?" And then at the same, and the people who take the potshots are often the people who are presenting themselves as experts at paranormal conferences. So you have that kind of attitude. I was on a panel in 2008 at a conference put on by the guys from Paranormal State in Pennsylvania, and there were a lot of the people from various TV shows on the panel. The panel was about the media, and one of them, who I will not name, made a comment about there being no literature on this stuff going back more than a few years.
What?
And so I spoke up immediately, talking about the literature going back to the 1800s, which is freely available on archive.org, the Internet Archive, and Google Books. And Michel Belanger also spoke up, and it's just one of those things that this clearly shows. Just that one bit of information statement that they made clearly showed that they don't know what they're talking about. And then, of course, the same person and a couple of the others from his show had also admitted on TV that they really don't read books. So, maybe that explains what.
How does this affect the public's perception of the work that credible parapsychologists like you do in the field?
I find that people who are truly interested in the questions that we're looking at tend not to watch those shows. They tend to get bored by those shows, just like I get bored by those shows. But there's a huge number of people who, and putting a lot of energy into their so-called investigations and ghost hunts and other things, spending an awful lot of money, that could be incredibly helpful as researchers if they went through even a little bit of training, who could provide a lot of information and data, and certainly even a little bit of financial support. I'm on the board of the Rhine Research Center, which struggles month to month just to even stay around and do any activity, whether it's educational or research-oriented, and trying to get people to join that as just members, which they get a huge benefit from a media library that the Rhine's been building up. They'll spend $300 to go stay overnight in a haunted prison, but they won't spend, $25 to support an organization that helps research. That also provides them back with information. So that you see two different groups that are there, and I tried for years to get my courses out to the paranormal community, and frankly, because I've been told point blank that most people aren't interested because I don't have a TV series.
Well, did Albert Einstein have a TV series?
Yeah, not that I remember. I don't even think he had a radio series.
Yeah, exactly. And I can go through the who's who of the scientific academia, and they don't have TV series. So what makes listen, from what I've seen on TV and these so-called reality shows, I wouldn't brag about that if I were them. Yeah,
I know. But they have the fan base, and really what it is that a good part of that community is a fan-based system, not anything to do with the phenomena itself. It's really about mimicking what they see on TV and being like the guys on TV.
Would you say that in some cases the following or the fan base is more or less like a cult?
I wouldn't say it's like a cult unless you want to consider some of the fan clubs that have sprung up around TV shows, movies, movie stars, TV stars.
Yeah.
In some respects, this is a little bit like the worst of Star Trek fandom.
Oh, boy.
The ones that Saturday Night Live used to make fun of. And having been, myself, part of Star Trek fandom from the early days, I went to the second ever Star Trek convention in New York in the 70s and really, felt it, but didn't walk around with ears on, Vulcan ears, and didn't consider that there really was a spacecraft out there. But there are people that did. That's kind of what Galaxy Quest made fun of to some extent.
Yeah. Loyd, we've got to take a commercial break very shortly, but I've got to tell you something. I wouldn't pay $300 to spend a night in a haunted hotel, a haunted prison, or any place else that claims to be haunted. I'm the kind of guy who likes to spend good money in a 5-star hotel.
I'm with you, too.
Yeah.
Totally.
Because I really don't think that I could justify spending that kind of money because there might be a ghost. Or I might...
They want to have an experience. And whether that experience is just sitting around in the dark and getting a little creeped out and getting a couple of potential EVPs, they just want to have an experience.
You can have that at home in the dark.
Of course.
Loyd, stand by. Nice talking to you. Congratulations on all the great work that you've done over the years. You've been an inspiration to many, and I have thoroughly enjoyed every ounce of information that I've been able to get on you. And, man, you just do it all. You're the real McCoy, so stand by. We'll be back on the other side of this break with Loyd Auerbach as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Explanation Loyd Auerbach is my guest this hour. www.mindreader.com and www.hauntedbychocolate.com. Why don't we do this for the Exonation, Loyd? What's the difference between what most ghost hunters do and what parapsychologists, like you, are professional, do in an investigation?
Well, the investigation that's done parapsychologically is focused on, first and foremost, the people's experiences. In other words, we have to have a story to investigate, something to investigate, not just a rumor that a place is haunted.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the important thing. Interviewing witnesses, finding out what their testimony is, taking them to going through the location with them, looking for, here's a key factor that's different. We constantly are looking for the normal explanations for individual elements of their experiences. So each encounter, each experience has to be judged on its own merits, not just the entire case itself. So we may find that everything except for one sighting was, in fact, all explainable. And so we're not trying to debunk anything. We're trying to understand and explain their experiences. We also look in the environment for alternative causes for each and every bit of what people are experiencing, what's been reported over the years. And then we have models that we fit what's left into, and a big difference for us is typically trying to help the people either understand and live with what's going on or help them try to resolve any situation that might kind of discontinue the phenomena if possible. And we also don't work in the dark, by the way. We don't turn the lights out.
In your experience, based on the 35 some odd and some odd years that you've been a professional parapsychologist, how many of the cases that you have been called to have been explained as natural phenomenon? And how many of those, and what's the percentage that you guys say, we don't know?
Well, first let me say that probably half the calls I get have, through the interview process and the phone, which we do at first, typically can be explained. Or they turn out to be things that are, one-time experiences that are really not investigatable, simply because it happened once. I can tell you what it might have been, but until it happens again, it may just be a one-time event. So it becomes kind of a cold case at that point. We get a lot of calls from people who may have had great experiences with family members also witnessing things, but it happened 5 years ago, and they're just talking about it now, and we can't really go in and investigate anything. A lot of the ghost hunters will still go over to that house and still try to get evidence, even though it's a quiet case. It's not really a case anymore. Percentage-wise, I'd have to say that every single one of the cases we go on investigating that's left has some element that's explainable. So some part of the experience or experiences are explainable. But there's a percentage, because we do this filtration process to begin with, there's a large percentage, and I don't have exact numbers because we really don't keep things that way, that have some element that's either a psychic experience of some kind or falls into the apparition, haunting, or poltergeist category in some way, even for just a little bit. And, again, the filtration process kind of knocks out a lot.
Why is it that some of these groups, organizations, clubs, fan clubs, TV shows keep on going to the same place time after time after time after time?
Well, there's something to be said, actually. There is a positive benefit for going to a location that actually has continued activity. There are places here in the Bay Area I go to, like the USS Hornet and the Moss Beach Distillery, where the activity has continued for years. And that allows you to get new information and talk to new witnesses. That's not typically what we see on the TV shows. It's not typically what we see with the ghost hunting groups. They may go back to places that other people have been to, and even if they go back a second time, they don't necessarily go in to try to find out if people have continued to have experiences or even talk to new witnesses. In fact, a lot of times they don't even talk to witnesses at all. They just bring their equipment in and base everything on technology that is not designed, and at this point cannot be designed, to detect something paranormal or psychic or ghostly. They make interpretations of things, EMF and other things that just don't make any sense from a scientific perspective. And they call themselves scientists because they're using technology, not because they are applying any sort of scientific understanding or principles to what they're doing.
So tell me, what can paranormal investigators use to measure whether or not there is a ghost or an entity or a spirit?
There is no device. There is no device that can measure whether there's an entity there, other than a human being.
Wow.
And we are dealing with the very idea of a ghost encounter or a ghost sighting starts out with a person seeing, hearing, feeling the ghost.
Mm-hmm.
So right off the bat, human beings, we are the detection devices. And so if you want to talk about what you can bring in as opposed to what's already there, the witnesses themselves, if they've been having experiences, right off the bat, they're your detectors. You just have to calm them down enough to work with them to continue to refine what they can pick up on, what their experiences are. But you can bring in people if you know how to find them and then you know how to sort through them and work with them. You can bring in psychics and mediums who might be able to add to the witness experiences or confirm or support the witness experiences, but it's always the witnesses that are kind of the primary starting point.
You use psychics during some of your investigations. Have you found them to be an asset?
The ones I've worked with, absolutely. I have, although I should say the ones I've worked with more than once. Mm-hmm. There have been some that I've tried out that either because their abilities were not as they thought they were. A lot of people actually are very sincere, think that they're sensitives or psychics,
right,
when in fact they're not. They may be observant, which is a whole different skill set that's still very positive. I've had people who turned out to be really good observers thinking that they were psychic through our observations, and they actually had they were assets in other ways. But there are also, besides the psychic skills, that there's also a personality perspective and an ego issue that's involved here. And unfortunately, there's an awful lot of psychics, mediums, and other folks, because they're performers, who don't play well with others, and those folks we just tend not to want to work with. They want to be the center of attention. That doesn't work when the people who are the center of their attention are the clients, not the psychic.
Wow.
So there's I have a whole list of qualities. By the way, one of the qualities, which is really important, is the ability to laugh at yourself, to have fun. I find that people who take themselves way too seriously, psychics or other people in other professions, are difficult to work with, and it's all about them, and we don't want to work with them. We want to work with people who actually question things themselves. Annette Martin used to question her own perceptions, and we go back and forth about what she was perceiving. That's somebody who actually can work through and try to figure out what's actually going on. That person is a ghost detective. That person is not just simply somebody there to say, "Ooh, look at me, I'm having a psychic flash."
Annette Martin, she was the psychic's psychic.
Yeah, Annette, her loss, her death is a real loss to me personally and professionally, and certainly to everybody here in the Bay Area.
And around the world, my friend.
And around the world, yeah.
And around the world.
I mean, absolutely.
I had the pleasure of having Annette on the show a number of times, and she was always so graceful, and she was also so what's the word I'm looking for here?
Well, she was fun. She was fun to work with.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But she was very modest.
Yeah, she was.
Yeah.
She knew herself. She knew her abilities. And, I'll tell you that here's a real big factor for a lot of psychics. And I see this actually in many of the mediums connected to or part of the Forever Family Foundation, and certainly the psychics I work with.
Right.
They have real lives besides just being psychics. Their entire identity is not wrapped up in being a medium. Most of the mediums who are connected to the Forever Family Foundation and many of the other folks I work with, unless you ask them, "Are you a medium?" that you would not know that they were mediums. It's not like they lead with that. They talk about their family. They talk about things they're interested in. It's not their identity, their full identity. And that, being able to connect with the real world, I think, is a very important factor here, too. The best psychics are all like that.
How do you, how should listeners gauge who is a real psychic and who's not? Because, people go to psychic fairs, they
Right.
How do they tell the pro from the con?
Well, first, I think you need to, when you're going to those psychic fairs, just determine why you're going. And if you're going for entertainment, then all bets are off. You should just simply go and have a good time.
Yeah.
But it's really about information, and it's about specifics, not about your personality. You want somebody to tell you, and by the way, it's not about your future either. The better psychics will tell you that they can give you, even if they are precognitive, they can predict something for you. But armed with that information now, you can change that. And in fact, you probably will to some extent. So the next time, you could go back to the same psychic the next day, and they probably will give you different predictions because you've already changed your future with that information. So anybody who claims, they can predict the future accurately, well, that's no better than any weather guy on TV who says they can accurately predict the weather. It's pretty much the same kind of odds, I think. But when people see psychics, look for, listen for names, dates, places, specifics about your life, specifics about people you know. And it may not be numbers, and it may not be specific names. They shouldn't be, some psychics and mediums actually only get partial information. So, they may be getting an M-sounding name like John Edward used to get.
Right.
Because he didn't actually hear stuff. I mean, I talked to a lot of mediums and what their process, mediums have different processes, and some of them get actually verbiage in their heads, and some of them only get pictures. And now they're playing a mental game of charades. So sometimes it does come through, and it's important to ask the psychic, how do you work? How do you get information? I mean, and that's a good starting point for the conversation for this. Also be careful if the psychic claims any sort of percentage accuracy, if they say they're 98% or 90% accurate. My first question is always to that person, how do you calculate that? Because to say that, you'd have to have with every one of your clients, taken every statement you gave them and had that checked later on to see if it was true.
Well, wasn't John Edwards exposed as a fraud?
No, people duplicated what he did on his show, and in fact, frankly, in those gallery readings, in those big readings, the best psychics are going to come off looking funny.
Really,
there's just nothing you can do.
What about the TV series where they were looking for America's best psychic, and I think Michelle White Dove won?
Yeah, I only saw a couple episodes of that, and it's real tough. I can tell you about John Edward. He volunteered to be part of research projects, and I have video from some research where he did in very, very different conditions than what you see on TV.
Right.
And he was not throwing out information. He was actually doing with limited feedback, and the feedback only became because a researcher was looking at the person in another room who was reacting to the statement, so the researcher did react a little bit. But there were specifics given, and it was ranked very, very highly. And there have been people like Edward who do really well and actually do better in circumstances where they don't see the person, where they can't get feedback. The Windbridge Institute, which is in Tucson and works with mediums for research, put 20 mediums through an intensive research project, separating them further and further by phone and by time and by distance from the actual clients and the spirit they were supposed to connect with. And the mediums did better and better the less information they had. They actually did better if they only got the first name of the deceased they were supposed to contact and the time that they were supposed to do that. And then the relative of that person had to, at that time, just sit down and think about their relative and say, contact whatever medium is trying to connect with you. And they did better in those circumstances than if they had been in a big crowd.
Do you think as we get further along in the science of quantum physics or quantum mechanics that a lot of the paranormal, or what is believed to be paranormal, will be explained scientifically?
I think what we'll see first, and we're already seeing that, is a comparison or analogy of the quantum world to what we're seeing with ESP. So what is called quantum entanglement, with information transferring instantaneously. That is probably not the same, what's behind what's going on with ESP, but there's certainly a good comparison there linguistically, and it may in fact be what's going on there. We don't really know at this point. But as we learn more about that, I think what the key factor with quantum physics is it'll help us understand and do more research with consciousness. And in science, this is one of the biggest problems with parapsychology in terms of being accepted by science. In science, the question is, what is consciousness? And there's a huge group of academics and other people that are reductionist, materialist people who believe that consciousness is simply a trick of the brain. It's a wetware condition. It has nothing to do with anything outside the body. It doesn't survive the death of the body. It can't exist beyond the skull. It's just our behavior, and it's kind of mechanistic. Whereas there are many people philosophically who approach consciousness in a kind of a dualistic perspective. And there are many different forms of dualism, that consciousness is something more than just brain, whether it survives the death of the body or exists outside the body or not. It's still something different than just brain.
All right,
It's created by brain, so, yeah.
Stand by, Loyd. You and I have to take our final break for this hour. Loyd Auerbach is our special guest this hour, Exonation. Always great having Loyd here. He is the voice of reason in the paranormal. Well, that's my opinion anyway. And it's shared by millions around the world. www.mindreader.com and www.hauntedbychocolate.com. We'll be back on the other side as we wrap up this hour here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Exonation, Loyd Auerbach is our very special guest this hour. Loyd is the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to all the strange, weird, bizarre going-ons that happen within the paranormal research, ghost hunting, Yahoo wannabes. He's the man to go to if you have any questions, if you want to know what the truth in parapsychology is about. www.mindreader.com. However, he has another website that I'm very curious about. www.hauntedbychocolate.com. All right, what's the story?
Well, I've been working on a book on chocolate for a while because I'm really into it, and I ended up taking a course thanks to the encouragement of one of the chocolatiers I interviewed on being a professional chocolatier. So I conduct guided chocolate tastings and presentations, and I make my own chocolate as well, and I make specifically ghost drops in all sorts of flavors.
Wow. Another short topic, because we've got about 3 minutes left, Loyd, is Forever Family Foundation. Their website is foreverfamilyfoundation.org. Tell us about the organization.
Right. It's an organization that supports research into life after death and also works with mediums in the family setting to help grieving parents, and especially parents who lost their kids.
Wow.
We have an annual conference coming up in Durham, North Carolina in November, and people can join for free. It's free.
Wow.
People go to it, and they're doing quite a bit with the Rhine Research Center, which is Rhine, RHINE.org, and I encourage people to definitely join or explore that organization as well.
Good people there. We've had Sally on a number of times. What a gal.
Yeah, Sally's. That was great, yeah.
Now, you've got another event coming up, I believe.
Yeah, the annual convention of the Parapsychological Association, which is the science convention of parapsychologists, open to the public. It's happening here in the San Francisco Bay Area, August 14th through 17th. Plenty of space at the conference if people want to come for a day or for the whole thing, and it's at parapsych.org, or you can actually link to the Parapsychological Association from my website, from mindreader.com.
Super. We've got about 2 minutes, Loyd. What would you like to tell the X-Zone Nation tonight? How can we set them straight on the real parapsychology?
Well, I think what people really should do is when they read things on the internet, they really need to consider the source. And I have a list of links for the major organizations, even some minor ones that are around the world, and start with those websites. The Parapsychological Association, the Society for Psychical Research over in England has a great website, and they're going to be doing a lot more stuff thanks to a bequest that they just got for educationally. The Rhine Center, read that. That's kind of like where things have been for the last 130-plus years, where they're going. And if you read that and then start reading the other sites, you're going to find a little cognitive dissonance, a little bit of conflict in the pop stuff that has come out of the TV shows, which has exploded, unfortunately, and the real information. And if you're armed with the real information first, you're a much better discerner of what's real and what's not.
And I have found over my years talking to people like yourself, Annette Martin, who is sadly missed, and other credible people within the realm of the paranormal and parapsychology, is that fact is stranger than fiction.
That is correct. I'm actually doing a seminar for screenwriters in Hollywood in September to try to encourage that, to let them know that they don't have to make it up. We got plenty of great stuff they can work from.
Exactly. Loyd, thank you so much for joining us. Always a great pleasure to speak with you. Congratulations on all your work, and I look forward to the next time you and I meet here in the X-Zone.
Thanks very much, Rob.
Take care, Loyd. X-Zone-Nation, www.mindreader.com and hauntedbychocolate.com. And the website for the Forever Family Foundation is www.foreverfamilyfoundation.org. I'll be back on the other side of this break at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour. Don't go away.